were both in the Steel City for what was a historic day in Pittsburgh sports. No, not as historic as where Nick took me last night. We were visiting the remnants of Forbes Field, and we actually stood on where home plate was when there was a stadium over now in what is the sprawling Pitt campus. Back in 1960, Mazeroski hit that home run, the shot heard around the world to beat the Yankees. That is that is Pittsburgh history. Today was Steelers history, where a 4-time MVP donned the black and gold in the form of 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers. Now, whether this will be history as in infamy or real fame has yet to be seen. We won't know that until the regular season starts. But what were your impressions on the first day, seeing the body language, obviously an extended Q&A with the assembled press, which apparently there were press from all over. I could not get in because there were so many other people with media credentials. But yeah, give us the rundown of what you saw and heard.
Instead, John went and talked to the great people of Pittsburgh in the Strip District, which true. I loved. Go read those things. But yeah, got to talk to Aaron Rodgers today, got to talk to his teammates, his new teammates. Mike Tomlin talked today. It feels different. I'm just going to tell you that. When you have a 4-time MVP, a Super Bowl champion, it feels different even than last year when we came in and Russell Wilson was there. There's just an aura about Aaron Rodgers because he's Aaron Rodgers. He's one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game of football. Even if he isn't the peak version of what he is still one of the greatest quarterbacks. These guys grew up watching this guy. I mean, some of these kids were 5 even when he won the Super Bowl.
Well, I heard someone asked, did he tell you, and I think he was referring to Will Howard.
Yes.
Did he tell you he was 3 when you were drafted?
Yeah.
And I don't think Rodgers liked that question. He said no, but I'm sure he will.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about, right? I mean, 41 years old, he's gonna be 42 this year. This is his 20th year, 21st season in the NFL. That's just crazy to think about with Aaron Rodgers. But here's the thing. I think all of his reasoning lined up. He was truthful throughout the process with the Steelers. He had personal issues. Now that is cleared up more. Now he feels like he can commit to the team a little more and give them his full effort. That was a big thing. He didn't. Here's the thing. It's not like he told them that he was going to sign with them. And here's how I know that. The reason I know that is because he didn't get the playbook. If that had been there, right? This is his first time getting the playbook. This is his first time getting, kind of the verbiage. All of that is new for him. That is all new. So Aaron Rodgers is kind of still working into it. And so he's not doing team reps right now. He said that today. Mike Tomlin said outright the reason he's not doing team reps is because he didn't want to take away reps from Will Howard. They want Will Howard to have as many reps as possible as a young guy. A little bit of a future play there. We'll see Aaron Rodgers a ton, I'm sure, in Latrobe.
Well, and Rodgers vowed to stay right by Will's side and mentor him. Now, of course, he's saying all the right things right now, but I mean, it was nice to hear. It was nice to hear.
It was nice to hear from Aaron Rodgers. And I think Aaron, and the thing that I like about Aaron and the way he went about it is it was very businesslike. There was no pot shots at the Jets. In fact, he outright said, I think you're trying to get me to take a shot there. And we know he took a lot of shots on his Pat McAfee appearance at Aaron Glenn and at those guys over there. Didn't take a shot at them this time. I think the correct way to go about it, focusing kind of on business. It was interesting. He said it was the Steelers are retired. I mean, he said he wasn't going to Minnesota or New York. Right. It was the patience the Steelers showed with him. It was the love Mike Tomlin showed. It's how much he reveres Mike Tomlin as a man, as a coach. It's as much as he kind of reveres the Pittsburgh Steelers organization. And so I think that's a big part of it. And so the Steelers and Rodgers are kind of just the marriage of a short-term fix to obviously a long-term problem for the Steelers. Right. They need to find the obvious answer next year. We expect that to be right here in 2026. But for now, this is the answer. I thought he came across well. Obviously, leadership part of it, it seems like, one of the things, and I want to read this direct quote, because I thought this was actually one of the more kind of unheralded parts of the presser, but I thought it was really good. He was kind of asked, at the end of his documentary, if you watched it, I don't know if you watched his documentary. I did. It's called Enigma if you wanted to. But one of the reporters asked, he said that he only had to prove something to himself. What was it? He said, I didn't remember saying that, but he said, I just want to have fun. More importantly, I want to give back to the game because the game has given so much to me. He wants to give the knowledge to Will Howard and all these other guys, which I think is a positive thing. So listen, he said all the right things.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool. This wasn't, an Aaron Rodgers press conference where there were kind of shots being thrown around, and he announced he was married, so that's a cool thing for Aaron Rodgers.
Right. Major life announcement by Aaron Rodgers. He's been married for about 2 months. We don't know to whom, but that was one of the things he was dealing with in the offseason.
And so, listen, good for him. Good for Aaron Rodgers. There's a lot of good things that he did in this press conference, but it's just a press conference. Let's see what it looks like on the field. I will say, just from takeaways from what I saw on the field, obviously, again, I'm only going off individual drills. It looks to be in quite good shape. Obviously, the release that is just so iconic, the whipping release he has, it's lightning quick. You don't really, I think, understand it until you see it in person. And I've never covered a game, where Aaron Rodgers played until last year. And even then, he's a little hobbled, so you didn't see it as much. But you see it now.
And that was early season games when he was still really recovering from the Achilles. He did actually pick it up down the stretch and actually was playing some of his best football since the surgery down the stretch for the Jets.
Right. And so here's the thing. I think, Rodgers at least looked solid. He looked nimble. I mean, he can go under center and can at least do bootlegs. I'll tell you that. I'm not sure he's going to be scrambling for, a ton of yards this year like he was when he was younger, but there's at least that. So, listen, Aaron Rodgers said the right things. He obviously is very close with Mike Tomlin. I think there's a built trust there. There's a relationship that was built between Mike T and him over the course of these months, working through that. I think he's excited to play with DK Metcalf. He called Darnell Washington a young Mercedes Lewis. Mercedes Lewis has been in the NFL for years as a blocker/receiving type. Aaron Rodgers loves Mercedes Lewis. I have a feeling he's probably going to really like Darnell Washington. Said Pat Frymuth was blowing up his phone all off season. So listen, there's nice nuggets. Say he's going to take the guys out to Malibu, where his home base is during the off season. So he'll kind of get a workout in with DK and the rest of the guys. But outside of that, I mean, nothing earth shattering. We didn't even get to see him in team periods today because it was Will Howard, Mason Rudolph, and Skylar Thompson still. Okay. So there's that.
Well, there's a lot to talk about, and just some of my observations, because I obviously was locked out. I didn't have the credentials to get in there, but I've watched everything on social media, all the clips. The newly married Aaron Rodgers, maybe he'll have some marital advice for the newly engaged Frymuth, who knows, when they get out to Malibu over a couple of beers after tossing the football. But the relationship with Tomlin, what I saw, what I heard in some of the clips, were two long-tenured, very successful guys, not necessarily motivated out of ego, but with something to prove, clearly.
Yes.
And one of the quotes that Rodgers said, he wants to make peace with a long career in football. And I think that's an allusion to he doesn't want to leave with a bad taste in his mouth. And what the Steelers did in terms of the patience that they showed amid a lot of fan criticism that, that Rodgers was playing games and that the Steelers were losing their standard of, people should be begging to play for the Steelers, But Rodgers was clearly going through something. He got married. There's other things going on in his personal life. And he's the type that likes to take a break from football. When the season's over, take a break, clear your head, deal with other things, get out of the bubble of football. And I actually think that's healthy, as somebody who likes to sort of break away from, the day-to-day of what you're doing. You do need to refresh, I think he is coming back with refreshed with a mindset of, he said, joining the Steelers is good for his soul. That was one of his quotes that really kind of stuck with me. And the other thing I liked was, he said he is going to learn the playbook, and this image that he has as somebody who works outside of the playbook and outside of the offense, as it's called, he really pushed back on that. And he said he's going to learn the playbook. He's going to talk with Arthur Smith at length. If there's things in there that he would like to see, he's sure that Arthur will add them. But he really pushed back on the type that he's going to call his own plays regardless of what Smith sends in. He said his job is to find the right play amid the assortment of what's called at the line of scrimmage and get the Steelers in a position for maximum success on offense.
Right, and there's about 2 to 3 plays in one call. I think people don't realize that sometimes, when you think of a play call, maybe you think on Madden, oh, it's just this. Well, you think of your audible section of it. There's 2 to 3, sometimes even 4 plays in a singular play call. There's a can call if you get the wrong look, for sure. The flip call is not. I'm not even bringing in the flip call where you just flip it. So there's a lot of different things that you kind of bring into a play call. So Aaron Rodgers, in the past, has he maybe done different things at the line of scrimmage? We know his intricate hand check system. That's going to be something the receivers are going to have to get used to. They're working on that a little bit today. It's going to be new for guys like Calvin Austin and Robert, even Robert Woods. I mean, I know he's a vet, but he's probably experienced it before, but that is even going to be a little new for him. So I thought that was kind of interesting as well to see. But, that's the extent of the Rodgers stuff today. I mean, I think it's clear why they waited for him. They felt good. They felt he wasn't going to retire, given how engaged he was with Pittsburgh in general, given how kind of informed he was based on his past coaches, right? He played with Mike McCarthy. Tom Clements was his QB coach forever. There's so many different names he's played with and has had as coaches that are.
Yeah, he had a great line, something like, I've been molded by a long line of Yinzers, you know. So that was another good line that he got off. And you alluded to this earlier, he does have an aura. The kids call it Riz, like charisma, and what was your sense of how other Steelers were responding to his presence?
Yeah, I mean, I saw, so during team periods, he would just have a kind of sheet of the calls because he's trying to get down the verbiage and the play calls rather than kind of running through the plays. So he's watching Mason and different guys. So there's guys coming up through him. I saw Jack Sawyer do it. You could see some of these young guys just like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, it's really Aaron Rodgers. They're like starstruck. Nick Herbig, I think, was a little bit starstruck. He's like, I think Nick Herbig's exact quote was, "I'd be lying if I said it wasn't different." It is. It's Aaron Rodgers, guys. I mean, that is something that you take into account. So I do think that's fascinating. He has a aura about him. Zach Frazier said the first thing they did in team meeting, Aaron Rodgers stepped up, talked, and said, "I'm all in now." So he's here. He's willing to win. He's willing to do whatever it takes. Aaron Rodgers is committed to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that's about as good as you can get from Aaron Rodgers right now. He's 41. He's going to turn 42. Is this probably a one-year thing? More than likely. He's probably going to retire after this year. Sure, this is probably the swan song. But it seems like he's all in for one last. And I think that's kind of what the Steelers needed, right? They needed, let's lay the groundwork, Aaron. Let's start to learn the plays, start to learn the verbiage, start to get your voice in there as a leader. Because let's be real here, by September, the 2 guys that these players are going to look to are going to be Aaron Rodgers and Cam Hayward. Those are going to be your 2 guys that everyone's going to look to. And sure, you're going to have a lot of other great leaders. You're going to have the TJ Watts. We'll get to TJ, I'm sure. Right. The Minka Fitzpatricks. You're going to have the Darius Slays, the DKs, the Robert Woodses. You're going to have those guys. But those are the 2. Right. Those are the 2 guys. And so
we really didn't have that on offense. Right. We didn't have that guy with the Riz, with the gravitas, with that, the way younger players look up to Cam. We didn't have that, on offense, did we?
No, and I think that was a big thing for him was, hey, there's got to be a leader there, right? I mean, these young guys that are great, Zach Frazier, Troy Fautano, Pat Frymuth was the elder statesman of the room. Pat Frymuth is 25, 26. Right. He's a young player still. DK Metcalf is only 27 still. I mean, it's not like they have these grizzled vets in there. So Aaron Rodgers is going to be one of those guys that is revered in that locker room. And so we'll see if he can make it happen. I think that's going to be big. Okay. He's willing to put in the work, and that's the first step because that was obviously the question with the weight and all the personal issues and everything. At the very least, they have a commitment. Now, can he make it happen? That's going to be the question. And, I mean, last year's tape certainly raises some questions if he can. I think it's an up-and-down experience when you look at it, but we'll see kind of if he can end up doing that. So, I don't know. I think Rodgers is – it's shocking. I told somebody today, not shocking, obviously, what has transpired over the last 3 months, but if you had told me at the end of the 2023 season, which is, when Mason Rudolph made that run, they lost to Buffalo in 2024. If you told me the next two quarterbacks of the Pittsburgh Steelers were Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, I would have said you're crazy. I would have said you're crazy. It's just kind of crazy to think that they are Steelers quarterbacks now, and they're forever going to be Steelers.
I know.
That is crazy to me. Those two players were quarterbacks. It's crazy that Justin Fields is weaved in there.
Right.
The happenings of this odd period, it's been kind of emblematic of what we've talked about with the Steelers. It's, all goes back to the kind of mediocrity they've been mired in, because they have greats, obviously, but it's not their MVP form, and how they can change those. So their best hope this year is kind of Rodgers finding that 09 Favre type of vibe. Can he do it? Is that still in his game? I think that's the question. And
you alluded to it. I mean, I was down in the Strip District talking to fans, and there is sort of a mixed reaction, even at the Steelers memorabilia stores, which are all over the Strip District. And I think part of that is we've had this succession of starters and failure in Pittsburgh at the quarterback position since Ben Roethlisberger. The weight, I think, the mercurial nature of Rodgers, the thing, he gets the rep as being a diva. So, but I think the other thing I noticed, as soon as the video was out of him in a Steelers uniform, the reaction on social media was like, wow, it was sinking in. This first ballot Hall of Famer is a Steeler now, and that will echo through history. I mean, that he's going to be forever associated, and let's just hope it's not a Franco going to the Seattle Seahawks.
Right.
That's what we're hoping it's not, but it is different. And, people are already starting, I think, to reappraise the situation. But of course, it's going to matter what happens on the field. Let me ask you, before we turn the page and talk about other things, this idea of what the offense is going to look like, this idea that he's going to have a lot of input with Arthur Smith over the summer. They're going to talk a lot about it. He will learn that playbook inside and out. I have no doubt about it. But do you think it's going to, because we know Arthur Smith likes to run and, pound the ball, and Tomlin, he likes splash plays, but he also likes running the clock and controlling the game. How wide open of an offense is this going to be?
Yeah, it's interesting because he played with Matt. He was coached by Matt LaFleur, who is like Arthur Smith's just crown jewel mentor, basically. It's funny because LaFleur's younger than Arthur Smith, but Arthur Smith was a tight ends coach under LaFleur when he was with Tennessee before he got the head coaching job with Green Bay. And I know Arthur Smith studies LaFleur's offense meticulously, week in, week out, steals things from him. You look at the Packers offense and you'll see a lot of similarities to what Arthur Smith does. Arthur Smith is part of the Shanahan tree. I don't think we talk about it enough. He's a little bit of an offshoot because he's more LaFleur than Shanahan, but there is part of that. And Arthur Smith is close with, Kyle Shanahan and Matt LaFleur and Mike McDaniel and Sean McVay and all those guys, Kevin O'Connell. Like, they all are in the same kind of boat together. Mm-hmm. And Arthur Smith is part of that boat. And so, there's going to be some things. I think more in-breaking routes, slants, digs. That's obviously a big part of what Aaron Rodgers does. That's DK's bread and butter, too. They fit together real well there. We'll see the back shoulder, throws that we saw last year. I'm sure we're going to see that. The question is going to be, how much are we going to see of the under center stuff? Because Rodgers typically does operate out of shotgun, sometimes even to empty rather than under center. But obviously, Arthur Smith is a very under center, turn your back, play action. It's not something that Rodgers has done a ton of lately in his career, but it's going to be something that I think he's going to do this year. The more and more things comfortable, as long as he's not banged up. Because last year, not only was he coming off the Achilles injury, he had a hamstring, he had a knee, he had a bunch of different leg injuries last year that hampered him. So can the mobility stay up to date and kind of be solid enough to where you can get that? That's all going to be the big question for them. But I think the mesh of the Rodgers-Smith idea is going to look a lot similar to how it looked with LaFleur's offense. I think, you look at the 21-22 LaFleur offenses, that's an MVP Rodgers year, right? So, that's kind of where I think this kind of falls in. You're going to kind of take a lot of things from Green Bay in that period, and we're going to kind of see where it goes. But I think the identity of this offense doesn't change. It's a play-action offense. It's a run-first offense. You're trying to be efficient. You're trying to get explosive without the play action. You're not trying to turn the ball over, obviously. And Rodgers, that's one of the stylistic fits that Rodgers fits so well with, is he does not turn the football over really much at all. Now, he had 11 picks last year. But in terms of his career, I mean, one of the lowest interception percentages in NFL history.
And down the stretch, he really dialed back on the turnovers down the stretch. He started off a little shaky for the Jets, but even though they only won 5 games, he didn't really have a bad second half of the season.
And when you talk with people in the Steelers organization, that's one thing that they always say. They have looked at the second half tape and feel like he started to have some vintage moments. So if you're hoping for the Favre year, that's where you draw it from. I think that is still, optimistic more than realistic. But if you're talking about where you think that's going to come from and where your ceiling is from, that's where it is. It's the second half of the season. I think they're getting a much more limited version of Aaron Rodgers. But I also will say, we talked last year just about how hard it was to work around Russell Wilson's limitations. He was just such a limited quarterback. He had the deep ball. He had kind of that as his thing, the moon ball, right? That's all we talk about. But I mean, at times that's all he could do. Rodgers can do more, and so you can work a little bit more with Rodgers. A lot of quick game stuff with Rodgers is going to be in this offense. So there's going to be limitations from Rodgers if he plays like he did last year. But it's more easy to work around. It's easier to work around than what you did with Russell Wilson.
Okay. Now, speaking, we have this marquee name in minicamp, mandatory minicamp. We had another marquee name who was not there in the form of T.J. Watt, who was clearly signaling that he plans to hold out until he gets Myles Garrett money, $40 million a year to continue his career in Pittsburgh. What was the signal that he's sending? Did the Steelers hear that signal, and does it move the needle on these negotiations?
I mean, listen, well, first of all, Myles Garrett said he's going to put Rodgers in his graveyard. I don't know if you saw that.
Well, he does have a Halloween graveyard of quarterback.
Cool. So that's where he's going to put Rodgers.
Yeah, that's where he's going to put
which
Rodgers.
Is fun.
Yeah.
But I also think, when you talk about T.J. Watt, this is sending a message to the Steelers like, I'm not playing around. Last time he went through these contracts, he was here.
Right. It was a hold in, right?
It was a hold in. He was working off to the side, but he was here. He was noticed and all that. Now, I think TJ's saying, hey, Rodgers is here, my time. It's my time now. You're giving me my money. You have an understanding of what your cap space is going to be because you're only paying him $13 million in base salary, $10 guaranteed. You have the incentives, but a lot of those incentives are probably not going to be reached for him. They include like MVP and Super Bowl and an AC title and things like that. So a lot of them are probably not going to be reached for Aaron Rodgers. And so now you have a cap space kind of understanding. But here's the other thing. I also look at the wide receiver room and I say, what if they want to go after Gabe Davis? What if they want to go after Keenan Allen? Gabe Davis is a little different. He'll probably get vet min because he's getting $11 million from the Jaguars. So that one you can make whenever. But his injuries, his torn meniscus that he's still coming off of, that injury is still looming for him. And there's a clear reason. He's made 4 visits, has not signed with any of them. He's probably not healthy yet. Probably wants to wait. Maybe that's a camp thing. And maybe the Steelers do end up landing Gabe Davis at some point. But if they want to sign Amari Cooper or Keenan Allen, or if there's another trade they want to make, they got to make sure they have this flexibility to make it. And so, before making a TJ contract, sure, TJ's cap hit could go down, but it depends on how they want to structure it. It could also go up. There's ways you could structure a contract to where you can either ease the cap hit or actually bring it up a little bit. So I don't know what they want to do. They're probably going to want to front load that TJ deal. I mean, he's going to be 31 years old. Right. $40 million for a 31-year-old edge rusher is a lot of money. That's a lot of money for him. And he's coming off a down kind of last end of the season. He was banged up. I know that. But certainly I think when you think about TJ, I think you say, man, there's more risk than there was when you were 26 down to 27. And so this is TJ that was sending the message like, hey, I'm serious. Like, let's get this done. And TJ and the Steelers have been negotiating for a while. Mike Tomlin said as much. And they are not surprised he wasn't there. So it wasn't a surprise at all that TJ didn't show up. I don't think he's going to be here this week unless obviously the deal gets done at some point. But we'll see. I think, the real question is, does this carry into training camp? And if it does, then I think you're in dangerous waters because even though I think TJ, coming when he did do that last time in 21, he came off and was just a monster that year. You remember he put up one of the best seasons in NFL history that year. And while you feel like he can do that, you just don't want that cloud hanging over your head. You don't want a Joey Bosa situation, which is Nick Bosa situation where he was away from the team for so long, and then he comes back in, and you have to work that. You want to get this done.
Well, and in this training camp, I think it's even more important because we've talked about that Watt needs to change his game somewhat from just relying on the burst, and also he himself has talked about moving from side to side and not doing the same thing over and over again where he can be chipped and basically turned statless for multiple games. So if he is going to be changing it up and trying to coordinate all this stuff, I mean, to me, this is an important training camp for him.
It is, and I mean, listen, I'm sure TJ's working on all that by himself with JJ, everybody, etc. JJ's probably working with him on all of that. I just know that for a fact. Those guys are insane maniac workers. TJ's going to be fine, I think, in regards to that. I just think it's better to get it done. Not only because the distraction's gone. Micah Parsons showed up to minicamp today in Dallas. Now, I know he and Jerry Jones haven't had exactly the most sterling public going relations right now through this. But, man, that says to me if Micah Parsons gets his deal first, that TJ price is going up. And the Steelers probably want to give TJ money like Max Crosby did. Max Crosby got $35.5 million. Well, if they had signed him right after Max Crosby had been offered, and they said, "Hey, TJ, we'll get you 36, 37." TJ probably would have signed it. But then Myles Garrett upped it to 40.
Right.
And I do think there is something there where TJ and Myles, they have this thing going on. I think that's something.
Right.
And he probably wants guaranteed money. And I think the guaranteed money is probably the holdup here. I don't think necessarily the average per year is as much the holdup. The structure of it, how many years are guaranteed of it, and the actual guarantee amount is probably where things are getting hairy. I think that's overall where things are. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're around the same salary mark, but I don't think they're probably around the same guaranteed money.
And just refresh my memory with the Garrett guarantee.
$83 million guaranteed.
$83 million guaranteed.
So really, of that 4-year deal that he has, 3 of them are guaranteed. So I mean, he is younger than TJ by a year because he's 29 and will be 30. So, I mean, TJ just says, "Okay, I'm 1 year old. Why should I not get that deal?" And so I think that's where TJ's going to look. He's like, Myles isn't getting any younger either. By the time Miles' contract runs out, I think he's going to be 34. So, I mean, TJ, is probably looking at that and saying, "Okay, give it to me," But so I think that's kind of what he wants. So do you have to beat those numbers? Maybe. Or do you have to get TJ? Do you have to wait TJ out? I mean, that's a tough one because Trey Hendrickson, he's holding out, and that's a rough deal. But what if his deal gets done? Aiden Hutchinson with the Lions, again, going to probably get a deal. So the more that guys come in with money, the more things change. The guaranteed structures, all of that pops in. And so really, I mean, yeah, I think that's a tough one. And, $83 million guaranteed for an edge rusher, a lot of money. A lot of money, in especially for one going into their mid-30s soon. That is a tough one. So are the Steelers going to end up meeting that mark? I think if they had it up to them, they wouldn't. But if that's what TJ wants, this is going to get sticky, and it's going to last a while. And so that's really where this all kind of plays out. But this is TJ trying to get leverage and send the Steelers a message, and he's serious about this.
Okay. Just as a side note from my tour of the Strip District, where there's basically a Steelers memorabilia shop on every block, there's a lot of guys who order all these T-shirts with players' numbers on and jerseys and the players' names who would basically be in bread lines if TJ Watt is no longer a Steeler. These guys have already thrown out your Pickett jerseys, your Pickens jerseys, your Russell Wilson jerseys, your Najee Harris jerseys. If these guys in the Strip District lose another player, and by far TJ Watt sells the most jerseys and T-shirts in Pittsburgh, bar none. If he's not a Steeler, these guys are out of business.
I will ease their concerns. I believe this is going to get done at some point, but we will see.
They're sweating a little bit.
Yeah, I don't really envision this. I mean, Mike Tomlin was straight up asked if he thought there was a danger to TJ's future, and Aaron just said no right away. I don't think his future is in danger whatsoever.
Well, and he even said that he was confident that he's working out and doing all the right things. And, like you said, the Watts are freaks when it comes to that.
They are. So, I mean, I don't really have a concern if this gets done. It's just this ain't going to be as smooth as the Steelers thought it was going to be. And they need to make out with as team-friendly as a deal as they can. And to be quite honest with you, given the absurd contract Myles Garrett got, the absurd contract Micah Parsons and Hutchinson are going to get, and potentially even where Trey Hendrickson might get, it might be best for the Steelers to cave. So they don't have to pay an even crazier number later on. So, the Steelers fumbled this by not getting this done earlier. This is their own fault.
As Kenny Rodgers once said, know when to hold them, know when to fold them. Nick is saying the Steelers should fold them and pay what before all those other contracts start ringing the register and upping the ante. Speaking of smooth, it sounds like our first-round draft pick is going to be a day-one starter, which is kind of a novelty for the Steelers. Usually, even the number ones, they wait a little while to get that starting nod, but not so. Give us a scoop on that.
Yeah, I mean, Carl Dunbar was straight up asked about it. If could we say Derek Harmon is the starting defensive tackle in their base package? He said, you can write that. And that's exactly what that case is. So he's your starting left defensive tackle, which is exactly where Larry Ogunjobi played last year. Keanu Benton sounds like he's sticking at nose. I thought there were a few interesting things. One, their confidence in Harmon is just through the roof. I thought that was really interesting. Harmon is a guy they're really excited about. His conditioning's at a high level. The questions he's asking Cam Hayward, very detailed. He's the type. He's got the right attitude towards things. But they also said, Carl Dunbar said, Keanu Benton's sticking at nose tackle, and he's around 310 pounds. They're like nose tackle traditionally. But they did have a 295-pound nose tackle back in the mid-2010s named Javon Hargrave, who ended up getting quite a lot of money around the NFL, if I remember correctly. And so that is interesting to kind of think about. So Benton sticking at the nose. It sounds like Cam is obviously going to be the other starter. Y.A. Black, the other defensive lineman, right now is working at 4-eye, but could play 4-eye or nose. And Carl Dunbar kind of sees him playing all over the place, so he'll be a versatile piece for them. Daniel Ekwale, they're signing from the Patriots, same way. So we kind of got a really nice breakdown of the depth chart already. I think you can probably make those 5 names that I just mentioned stone cold roster locks. So let's see who else emerges. Is it going to be, Isaiah Loudermilk, DeMarvin Leal, Logan Lee, somebody else completely off the radar? So all of those come into effect. But Harmon, I mean, they've started to speak volumes, I think, about what they think about their rookies. Troy Falatano was going to start last year before the MCL sprain, and then he was going to be reinserted into the lineup before, unfortunately, having that season-ending injury. I think Harmon's very similar on a track. They just trust this guy. He's done everything right. He's checking up all the boxes. And so as a result, he's going to be a day-one starter.
Excellent. And I'll tell you, I think that Cam-Harmon relationship is going to be something special. And I'd love to be inside and hearing, the back and forth, the mentorship, the student appreciating the teacher, and everything that goes with it, and the legacy, the Steelers' legacy being passed from one to another. I think that's something special. I'd love to hear more about that, but we're kind of running out of time for today. A historic day. Nick is burned out. He's been at it all day long, posting up a storm and posting videos. So we're going to let him go. And of course, he'll have more throughout the week as minicamp continues. And certainly lots of posts on Penn Live as well. So check it out. And we'll be back next Tuesday for another show and sort of recapping minicamp and where we head from here. Until then, go Steelers.